If you want to help out and support the channel, there are a few things you can do. Go check out Flipside Gaming and use the promo code VOIDMAGE in all caps. This will get you 10% off all orders $10 or more. And if you go shopping on tcgplayer.com, go use my affiliate link in the description below. That way all purchases you make will go towards helping the channel. And lastly, go check out my Patreon. It's a more direct way that you can help the channel while also getting some more interaction. I appreciate all of your support. If you haven't already, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Hello everyone, Commander Void here, coming back at you all with another Commander deck tag video. Back to Throne of Eldraine for Kenrith, the Returned King. If you want to see the full deck list, the price, everything, I'll have a link to that in the description below. Kenrith is one of the more interesting looking commanders from the set. He's 5 mana and just white, but the activated abilities means that you can play him as a 5-color commander. Really nice having that flexibility, sort of like General Tazri, so even if you don't have all 5 colors, it's not going to stop you from actually casting him as your commander. Now going over all of the abilities, the first one is just 1 red, all creatures gain trample and haste until end of turn. The second one is 2 mana, this time it's green, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. The third one is 3 mana, this time it's white, target player gains 5 life. The fourth one is 4 mana and it's blue, target player draws a card. And the last one is pretty good, 5 mana and it's black, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under its owner's control. Now the cool thing here is that you don't have to build this in just one way. If you have plenty of mana, and if you're willing to, you could of course help your opponents. That first ability especially is going to be pretty disgusting. So what we want to do here is embrace mostly group hug, but we also want to be incredibly political. And that's usually how we're going to want to win the game, choosing sides, keeping players in the game by giving them life, helping them draw cards, or bringing their creatures back from the graveyard to the battlefield, because so many commander games turn into archenemy where there's one player at the table who has all the power, they're way ahead, they have like 80 life, or some crazy situation like that, and there's no way you're going to take them down on your own. So make some deals, be a little bit more political. This of course should not discourage you from using any of these abilities on yourself, but where this deck is going to be the most fun is just fooling around with your opponents. Now the land base, what we usually start off with is pretty basic for 5 color. You want as much mana fixing as possible. To be a little bit more on theme though, we do have a Forbidden Orchard. Gives us exactly what we want in a land in terms of the mana fixing, but we're also giving an opponent a colorless spirit. Next we want to talk about our artifacts, because in a 5-color deck, if you don't have the ramp, especially when you have all of these awesome abilities to use, the deck just isn't going to function. It's not going to be the strongest deck to begin with, so if you don't have ways of getting more mana, you are definitely going to struggle. The new Arcane Signet should help us out a lot. Basically Command Tower on a 2-mana rock. This is of course in addition to rocks we probably would have been playing before, like Felwar Stone, Chromatic Lantern, and Commander Sphere. It's not so much about how much mana you can get, but rather can you get whatever color you need. And a mana rock that I fell in love with when I first saw it back in Battle Bond, Victory Chimes, is perfect for a group hug / political deck. It untaps during each other player's untap step, and a player of your choice can add a colorless mana to their mana pool. You don't have to do this, but of course, if a player wants to be friends with you, why not lend them 1 mana? It's also pretty good when you have a lot of abilities because it just untaps during each other player's untap step. So you'll always have that 1 extra mana to work with. Now our mana rocks do help us out with mana fixing, but we need a little bit more. Farseek, Cultivate, Kodama's Reach, Pier's Whim, Tempt with Discovery are all really good ways in a 5-color deck that we can get a bunch of basic lands or whatever we really need. You also get a bit of a group hug element here with Pier's Whim and Tempt with Discovery. These pretty much help ensure that in addition to our artifacts, we get the mana that we need, which is so important because certain abilities, if we're not able to activate them, we might miss out on a key interaction in the deck. We might not be able to help out an opponent when we really need to. It's just not a good time. Now, sticking with mana, we have other ways to abuse our mana. Seedborn Muse is going to untap all permanents we control during each other player's untap step. This, in addition to Awakening and Wilderness Reclamation, are pretty ridiculous because we have a bunch of abilities that we can use immediately after we untap our lands. We are able to draw cards and bring creatures back from the graveyard to the battlefield. We don't want to get steamrolled, so we want to be able to use those as often as possible. So I highly recommend that you play these green cards that do untap lands. Need even more mana production? Well, there's Regal Behemoth and Mirari's Wake. Both are good mana doublers. I like Regal Behemoth a little bit better because it's a creature we can bring back with Kenrith. and it gives us card draw off of the Monarch. Now finally, going away from mana, we do have the activated abilities. Training Grounds and Biomancer's Familiar are going to be key cards in the deck, making it much cheaper to use our abilities, especially drawing cards, gaining life, and putting creatures from the graveyard onto the battlefield. Those are very good. If we can do that more often, we're going to be in a position to possibly win the game. In terms of creature presence, we're not going to overwhelm our opponents. We only play 18 of them. This isn't a pillow fort deck, but it would be foolish to not consider Ghostly Prison or Propaganda. These two cards at the very least, even if you just have one of them out there, it definitely helps. But if you just want to stop your opponents from attacking you, there are other ways. There's Orzhov Advocist. While it doesn't completely prevent your opponents from attacking you, they pretty much give away what they're going to do. If they don't get the +1/+1 counters on their creatures, you know they're attacking you. So you should have more time to respond. Pramakonskaya Rampart is another way that we can just stop a certain opponent from attacking us. We can choose left or right. Players can only attack in that direction. Super useful, just point in a direction where an opponent has more creatures and are likely to overwhelm you. Now we talk about Group Hug. There are a ton of Group Hug cards to choose from, and it can sometimes overlap with Politics. I tend to associate Politics with Group Hug the most because there's just so much player interaction within these decks. You are eventually going to be forced to choose one opponent over the other. A big time staple coming from M20, Scheming Symmetry, is perfect for this deck. It's pretty much Imperial Seal if you don't care about the opponent you choose getting a card. This is Commander, and it's perfect when you need that tutor. In a similar sense, we're going to be playing Skullwinder, which is pretty much a political version of Eternal Witness. You're going to allow an opponent to do the same thing. These cards are not really competitive. Most non-political, non-group hug decks are not even going to consider these cards, but these really help you stay in the game longer. When you need an answer, sometimes it's best if you can give an opponent an answer. The new Pendant of Prosperity from Commander 2019 is also a pretty cool card. A little bit risky though, because the opponent you give it to doesn't always feel like paying that mana, but when they do, you get to draw a card and put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. And the card I recommend not playing that much anymore is Howling Mine. It's nice if you can give everybody extra card draw, but it just sort of sits there on the field and it doesn't really do anything else for the remainder of the game. I would much rather play Temple Bell. Yeah, it's 1 mana more, but it gives you the decision of allowing each player to draw a card, rather than just having a condition where they get to draw an extra one. Temple Bell is sweet because you could just save it at the end of your opponent's turn, right before it's your turn. That way you get the extra card and you have your whole turn to work with. It's a little bit safer in my opinion. Another way to get some card draw is Generous Patron. When Generous Patron enters the battlefield, support 2, you put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 other creatures. Whenever you put 1 or more counters on a creature you don't control, you draw a card. This works out perfectly with Kenrith because his second ability is just 2 mana, and we can put a +1/+1 counter on any target creature. So rather than paying 4 mana to draw a card with his 4th ability, we could just pay 2 mana and draw a card that way, while also helping our opponents get +1/+1 counters on their creatures. There is also Keneos and Tyro of Miletus. There are many threats that are stopped with 8 toughness. You also get card draw for everybody and extra land drops. And last, when we're talking about group hug card draw, we have Well of Ideas. I like this much better than Howling Mine because it gets you a little bit more card draw. It enters and you get to draw 2 off of that. But it's pretty much a Howling Mine where each opponent draws a card, but at the beginning of your draw step, you draw 2 additional cards. Other than that, most of the deck is going to seem a bit more political. We have cards like Sylvan Offering and Intellectual Offering. The offering cards from Commander 2014 work out perfectly in a deck where we're already choosing opponents to help. Sylvan Offering can get you a bunch of tokens and a really big one. Intellectual Offering can give you card draw while also untapping some non-land permanents. Maybe it's your mana rocks, so you get to use Kenrith's abilities. There are also the Tempting Offer cards. I mentioned Tempt with Discovery earlier, but there's also Tempt with Vengeance. This could potentially be a way to eliminate a player. If you are playing a nice, friendly group hug deck, why shouldn't your opponents be getting those tokens so that you can get double or even triple and potentially knocking out a player because those elemental creature tokens have haste? So if you can put 15 mana into this towards the end of the game, that is definitely a way that you can start killing players. There are also the Will of the Council cards, Split Decision and Council's Judgment. Split Decision is sort of the more political counterspell, seeing as most people are probably going to vote for Denial, and Council's Judgment is one of the best removal spells in white. nobody can vote for any of your non-land permanents, so even if multiple permanents are not exiled with this card, you can at least ensure none of your stuff is. And similar to Pier's Whim, we're also playing those other friend or foe cards from the same set, Battle Bond. Vertice's Maneuver is going to help us get creature cards from our graveyard to our hand. Our foes are going to have to sacrifice a creature they control. And Zendersplit's Judgment, let every one of our friends copy a creature they control, while our foes are going to be bouncing one to their hand. Another really cool theme here, it's also a bit more political. We have those hunted creatures from Ravnica. The Hunted Phantasm is unblockable. However, when it comes into play, we put 5 1/1 red goblin creature tokens into play under target opponent's control. Again, help out the little guy, whoever's way behind in the game. Hunted Troll is the same idea here. You're giving a target opponent 4 1/1 blue fairy creature tokens with flying onto the battlefield, but you have an 8/4 that can regenerate. Hunted Dragon, 6/6 flying haste, really powerful creature. We give a target opponent 3 2/2 white knight creature tokens with first strike. And although it isn't a hunted creature, it is kind of the same idea here. Clackbridge Troll from Throne of Eldraine fits in perfectly. We're giving a target opponent 3 of those goat tokens. They don't really do much. They're not good in combat. I guess they could just be chump blockers. But at the beginning of combat on your turn, if an opponent does sacrifice a creature to tap Clackbridge Troll, we gain 3 life and we draw a card. So we do have a bit of muscle in the deck if we want to start swinging. Now we don't have that much removal, that is a weakness. Generous Gift is White Beast Within, but it's called Generous Gift, so if you can only play one, why not go with the one that sounds friendlier? There's also Fractured Identity if we want to exile a specific non-land permanent. The downside here is that every other player gets a copy of it, so rather than getting rid of a really problematic card, you could just get rid of a really powerful one so that their opponents can start ganging up on them. Tragic Arrogance is not really group hug, but it's a way that we can keep our Kenrith out there with some of our other permanents. And play of the game is the big Exile board wipe. Exiles all non-land permanents, and we can always have another player help us out on the mana cost. Magister of Worth is another Will of the Council card. They vote between Grace or Condemnation. It's almost always going to be Condemnation because people really want board wipes in Commander. And finally, to end the video, I want to talk about a card that is probably the craziest win con in the whole deck, Mana Charged Dragon. Flying Trample, and it has joined forces from the original Commander set. Whenever Mana Charged Dragon attacks or blocks, each player starting with you may pay any amount of mana. It's going to get +X+0 until end of turn, where X is the amount of mana you paid this way. It's a flying dragon with trample, so if your opponents are feeling really spiteful, they could just dump all their mana into it to help you kill another player. It is one of the funniest cards because it just comes out of nowhere and ends games. But anyway guys, that's going to do it for this video. Let me know what you think about it. I didn't want to play the Pillow Fort strategy I was seeing a lot of. It sounds good in theory, but you need to be able to punch back. And it really helps if you have that aggressive ramp because Kenrith is all about the abilities. Anyway, you all have a wonderful day. Void here signing off. See you all next video.